So today we're doing lesson 1.5. As you know, that means module 1, lesson 5, back into the Eureka math system. Okay, yesterday we took a little detour, but today we're back on the main road. Okay? And your learning goal today is by the end of math today, you should be able to name any decimal using expanded form, word form, and unit form. Now in your head you might be thinking, ooh, some of these words sound familiar, like expanded form or word form, but you might think, I don't know what unit form is. And that's okay. We're going to talk about it today. But first, let's talk about the problem of the day. What's a decimal? We've been talking all week, this week and last week, about decimals. What's a decimal? Talk to the people around you. See if you can come up with an answer. I'm going to call on anyone in this room, so everyone's accountable for knowing for answering, what do you think a decimal is? Go. So Yantin said a decimal is a number form of a fraction. Haley said, when I was talking to her earlier, that a decimal is what separates the zeros from the rest of the numbers to make it bigger or smaller. Turjo, what do you think?
I think a decimal is a point that separates the whole numbers in the number and the things that are parts of a number.
So Turjo says decimal is the part that separates the whole and the parts, right? When we talk about a decimal, we're talking about this part, the stuff to the right of a decimal point. Is a decimal more or less than 1?
Less.
It's smaller than 1, huh? Let's think about it using money. Here we have a picture of a dollar bill, yes? How do I write $1? I would write it like this, right? I would go $sign 1.00, right? Okay. Now if I have 1 penny, do I have $1? No. Do I have a whole dollar or only part of a dollar? Part of a dollar. How do I write 1 penny? If something costs only 1 cent, how do I write that using a $sign? It'd be $sign, and then how many dollars do I have? 0.01. So is a penny a decimal?
Yeah.
Because it's part of a whole, right? Do you see how a penny is only part of a whole? How many pennies would it take to make 1 whole dollar? 100 pennies, yeah. How much money do I have here in this picture? That's a nickel. 7 cents. Is that a whole dollar?
No.
So is it a whole or a decimal?
Decimal.
How much much money do I have? How would I write that using numbers?
Or you could write a 7 and a cent sign.
Oh, we're writing using $signs. Thanks for pointing that out. So this one is 7 cents. It's only part of a whole. This one's 1 penny. It's also only part of a whole. And this is a whole dollar. Yes?
Yeah.
Is this the only way to write these amounts? I can show 1 cent as being 1 out of 100 pennies that it would take to make $1. 1/100th of a dollar. Yes?
Yeah.
What about 7 cents? How would I write 7 cents as a fraction? Taylor?
7 over.
Yeah, because it's 7/100ths of a dollar. So looking at this, can we refine our answer for what is a decimal? Is a decimal just part of a whole?
No.
A decimal is just part of what it takes to make 1 whole. So 1 penny is part of $1. This is only a decimal of this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to write in your notebooks that a decimal is a part of a whole. And just like Jonathan said, another way to think of a decimal is a fraction. So I want you to write that too. If a decimal is just part of a whole and a fraction is just part of a whole, does that mean we can write any fraction as a decimal?
Yeah.
Can we write any decimal as a fraction?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to practice writing these decimals as fractions. Okay, so write in your notebook what you see here, 0.05. Okay. Now when we look at 0.05, I see a 5. Do you guys see a 5 here? Yes. What place value is that 5 in?
100.
The hundredths place. So we could, in word form, what do we call this number? 5/100ths. Thank you to those of you who are writing it down right away. Now 5/100ths, that means it's 5/100ths. Do you see how you can write it like that as a fraction?
Yeah.
Now looking at this second example right here, what do we have in the ones place?
1.
What do we have in the tenths place?
5.
What do we have in the hundredths place?
9.
What do we have in the thousands place?
2.
Okay. What do you see in between the ones place and the tenths place? Yeah. Every time you see the decimal point, there's a word that we use in word form. decimal point equals the word and. Okay, so I want you to take good notes and write that down in your notebook. Every time you see a decimal point, the word form is and. So what number do we have in the ones, or how many holes do we have, by the way? One. So we have 1, and that's the decimal sign. How many parts do we have? What do we have in the decimal part? 592, and then the rightmost one is thousands. So we have 1 and 592 thousandths. Okay, and so to write that in fraction form, it's 1, that's the whole part, and 592 over what denominator?
1,000.
1,000, very good. All right, here we have 33 hundredths. How would I write that using numbers? I have 33, and the rightmost place value needs to be in what place? Hundredths. So the decimal point needs to go right here to make that last 3 into the hundredths place. How would I write that as a fraction? 33 over 100. Very good. Now the last one says 4 thousandths. 4 thousandths. Okay, so when I'm thinking I want to write it in decimal form, I'm going to write the number I see first, which is 4. Then I'm going to think, okay, I need this 4 to be in the what place? Thousands. So if I put the decimal point here, will it be in the thousands place?
No.
If I put the decimal point here, what place is that?
1.
Okay, if I put the decimal point here, what place is that in?
10.
Okay, if I make an extra space here and put a 0 here, and then put the decimal point here, what place is it in now?
100.
Am I ready yet? What do I need to do?
One more.
Add one more 0, and then if I put the decimal point here, is that thousandths?
Yeah.
Good. How can I write that as a fraction? Sonatin?
4. Add 4 the numerator, 1,000 is the denominator.
Very good. All right. First thing you need to do is write down this number, 0.001. Okay, we are going to draw it in a place value chart. Okay, so draw a quick place value chart. And I'm going to put my decimal point here, and we have 0.001. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, let's name all the places in the place value chart. What's the place to the left of the decimal point?
1.
Okay. What's one place to the right of the decimal point?
10.
And is tenths just like this, 1 over 10?
Yeah.
Okay, then we have the hundredths, and we have the thousandths. Okay, so let's take a look at the digits we have. We have a 1, and the 1 is in the what form? I mean, in the what place?
The thousands.
Thousands. Do I have any tenths or hundredths or ones?
0.
No, all I have is 1 in the thousands place. So in word form, this number is 1,000th. Be careful, don't write 1,000. Does that mean something different?
Yes.
That TH is kind of silent, thousandth. You can barely hear it, but it's so important, right? 1,000th. Okay, that's the word form of this number. Now in expanded form, there's 2 ways to write expanded form that you need to know. You need to be able to write expanded form using fractions and expanded form using decimals. Okay, let's talk about fractions first. Do I have any ones in my number? How many ones do I have? 0. How many tenths do I have?
0.
How many hundredths do I have? 0. How many thousandths do I have?
1.
Okay, so I can write the thousandths like this. I have 1 copy of 1,000th. That's the expanded form. If I want to write that using decimals, I can write that this is 1 copy of 0.001. Does that make sense? Okay. And then when we're talking about unit forms, we're saying what are all the different ways to name that number? Now with this one, there's only one. It's 1,000th.
So we write it in word form?
Mm-hmm. You write it in word form. I'm going to remind you again, when we talk about word form, we look at the whole part, and then we look at the fraction, or the decimal part. So for this number, the whole part is everything that's to the left of the decimal point. Yes?
Yeah.
And then everything that's the decimal is everything that's right of the decimal point. So what do I have on the left?
0.
0 holes. So we can just ignore that. How many what number do I have in the decimal part? 13. And then I look at what place value is the rightmost number in. What is that place value? Thousandths. So this time in my decimal part I have 13 thousandths. So I'm going to write that as my word form. So 13 thousandths. Okay? Now, when I'm looking at expanded form, I'm just looking by place value. Okay, so let's look at starting from the left. How many ones do I have? 0, right? I have 0 ones. How many tenths do I have? 0, so I don't need to worry about that. How many hundredths do I have?
1.
So in my expanded form, I'm going to write that I have 1 copy, or 1/100th. And then I need to add to that, how many thousandths do I have? 3 thousandths. Okay, so do you see how when we're talking about expanded form, we're just going place value by place value? Okay, and we write how many copies of that and we add them together. Okay, so does that make sense? Now that you know the fraction form, try to write the decimal form. Should be 1 copy of 100th, of 100th, right? Plus 3 copies of, is that a decimal? No, that's a fraction. 3 copies of 1,000th. Now let's talk about unit forms. Could we call this 13 thousandths, this number? Yeah. Could we call it 100th plus 3 thousandths? Yeah. So unit form is all the different ways we could call it. Could we call this 130 10 thousandths? Because if I added a 0 over here, would that be 130 10 thousandths? Yeah. So unit form is all the different ways you can call that number. Okay, so write down some different unit forms that we just talked about. Okay, remember, when we do the word form, we always look at the whole number part, and then the decimal point, and then the decimal part. Okay, so let's look at the whole number part first. It's everything to the left of the decimal point. What do I have in my whole number part? 25. So we're going to write that out using words. 25. And then we have a decimal point. The decimal point is always, always, always what word in word form, everyone? And. Very good. And then we take a look at our decimal part. That's everything to the left of the to the right of the decimal point. What number do I have just looking at the digits? 413. And then I take a look and see what place value this is. What is that? Thousandths. So I say 25 and 400. 13 thousandths.